Hi, welcome to White Women Wake Up. I'm Jonelle.
And I'm Karen. Together, we're diving into real, unfiltered conversations about what it means to wake up as white women in a world shaped by bias, privilege, and inherited patterns. We're here to challenge norms, unpack our privilege, and foster empathy through raw intergenerational dialogue. It's not always easy, and we don't always agree, but we show up anyway. Growth isn't comfortable. Let's wake up together.
Let's wake up. Okay, for those of you watching us, you might think we are recording this in the middle of January, given what we are wearing right now. But this is what April in Seattle looks like. Turtlenecks and sweaters still. So be grateful for all of you out there who have nice weather this spring.
Yes, no kidding, no kidding. Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Hey, did you do your homework?
I gotta be honest with you. I don't fully remember the homework. It's been a week, so you're gonna need to kind of loop me in on it.
I did a lot of thinking around it because it's, me, anything that...
Can you remind the audience and me what the homework was?
About is how sexism plays a role in how we as white women show up in the workplace and other places. We have access to white men, and because of our access to white men, we often can figure out a way to possibly get to the table or get to places of privilege or have a voice. And then without us knowing it, sometimes we're used as their pawns. Yeah. And so I think for me, because it's such a new concept, you said that that's a concept that women your generation are really aware of. And I was totally not until I read this in this one text. And I think I've just been watching it, and it's really crafty, right? Yeah. This idea that, so anyways, I see it playing out a lot now. I see it as, where did I play a role in helping the patriarchy reinforce their power? Where did I play a role in thinking that my victimness was aligning with persons on the margin, not realizing that I still had like this additional access to power simply because I had access to white men?
Did you have any examples that you thought about?
Did, but I'm kind of nervous because some of them are work related, and I don't know if that should be public. So, yeah, I did. I saw a couple play out in my workspace where I wasn't part of it, but I saw it with other people where some white women didn't even realize in some ways they were being pawns to the patriarchy. So it's really unfortunate. And I think what happens is, I don't know. I don't want to dismiss that perhaps they were doing it purposefully. I don't know.
It's interesting. This is a derailment on today's subject, but which I do really want to get into. It's my topic. But I am reading for my book club right now. I'm reading a book called Careless People, and it's all about the Facebook leadership. And it's just so interesting again how, the book Lean In was all about female camaraderie and written by one of the executives at Facebook. And so we have this like big vision of her being this like female-led, driven person. But this book, Careless People, is really interesting and more the insight that looks like the typical corporate America, which is really crawling over women to get to the top, utilizing to, like we talked about, like your proximity to white men to kind of step on other women. So it's an interesting read for anyone else there's Careless People.
Well,
really fascinating.
And I do want to say one of the things that Jonelle and I are really looking at are reading recommendations, and we are trying not to center white women. And we are trying to center our authors to be persons on the margins, people that have been othered. And so this is what we're working on. So is that one?
No, that is not one. So
so that's,
No, and you're right. I didn't mean this as
no,
like
I don't know.
podcast recommendation around.
So read it because it'll probably open our eyes. But the reading recommendations that we're trying to give out, because it's making us grow. It's making me read so many different books about, what does it mean to be queer in America? What does it mean to be in a different body in America? And so, again, trying to center people who have been biased against. So.
Totally. Yeah. I was just bringing it up because it touched on last week's topic.
Well, and the thing is,
Those are two different
I know,
topics,
but it does, because as a white woman, I didn't realize how complicit I was. I was trying to get to the top, and getting to the top meant getting to know white men in particular. And I had proximity, and I thought I was aligning with other people when in fact I was probably being a pawn. I guess for anything, when we talk about our homework from last week, it just made me think about it more. It made me think about, like one of the things we talked about last week was this idea of changing the rules or changing the policies. And often myself in management as a white woman, I was in meetings with a lot of, and I'm not trying to be, we're not against men. We love white men. That's not the issue here. No, I love my husband no, that's not my issue.
You can love individuals. As a societal whole. I don't
societal whole. But anyways, I did play that game. I would be in corporate spaces where the rules of the boardroom changed a bit, and I would kind of go, sure, no big deal. And then I was the one that had to I had to deliver those rules, right? And then I was kind of like, hey, lighten up. Can't you go along with this? Not realizing that, especially when you're someone in the margins, someone that has really had to work even harder to be in these spaces. These policies and these rules make a difference. It helps determine how you're going to go along with these systems. So anyways, made me listen to it more.
Yeah.
Go for it.
No,
okay,
great.
that's me. We're growing up. We're waking up.
Yeah.
Yeah, or I'm waking up at least. Yeah.
So today's topic, it is something that I already know you and I have differing opinions on because we've been talking about it a little bit this week. So we'll kind of see where we land here.
Okay.
But as you know, I have been struggling with, how do I even phrase this?
I know where you're going.
I know exactly where you know what I'm going, because this has been something
because we're really trying to tether this out.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
I have been struggling with the impact, and impact's not even the right word. In a nutshell, we'll just go with this. I've been struggling in a nutshell, the concept of the hands-off movement that happened over April 5th. And
it's happening again.
It's happening again.
Yeah.
And I want to be clear. Let me tether out my points a little bit. And so the more that this is unfolding, I love the idea of community and people getting together and standing up for something and being aligned and talking about stuff that is frustrating them in what's happening in our world right now. That I completely agree with. The hands-off organization as a whole and what they're trying to do to bring awareness, from what I've seen, they seem like a great organization. I think where I'm struggling with this is, and as I've kind of tethered this week, is one, the idea of calling what happened last week a protest. I think, or, what happened on April 5th a protest.
Yeah.
I think, and I'll unpack that. I think the second thing around is so much of it felt very performative to me, and that breaks my heart. And and there's some things that I kind of want us to explore and talk about. And I've looked up some facts about things. But anyways, I'm going to leave it at that. I want the audience to hear your kind of initial thoughts. Again, unfortunately already had parts of this conversation several times this week.
Yeah, but that's okay. We've really talked about it. And we haven't landed anywhere. No. And so one of the things that my mother always used to have me do is go to the dictionary and look things up. So I did look up this language of, protest versus rally. And or march versus rally. And it's a fine line because basically they say the same thing. So although I would agree, at least in the context that I was in, I was more in a rally because I ended up being down in a small town in Southern Illinois. And it was, from my point of view, I protest, yes, if you were take it from the literal sense, collectively, persons were protesting the way the government is moving forward. So that literally that word of collective protest, they were protesting. They were not in agreement. They were protesting the way in which the government is unfolding its its policies right now. I don't even know if I can use the word judicial because many of them aren't even legal. So anyways, they were protesting. And yet, I would agree, this performative activism, I think it's challenging because as white women, it's hard. Like, what do we do? I felt like there was there's so much discussion, and I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but like for what I'd heard, one of the things that this podcast is doing for you and I is I am trying to get on a lot of classes and a lot of news media from people that are on the margins. And I even hate that word because what does that mean? But anyways, people who have been othered and or fall in the classes of ableism, racism, sexism, xenophobia, and all that. And many of these people did not want to show up to the hands-off march because, especially if you were in a person of color, because you would be targeted for possible police brutality. So I really appreciated many of my Black friends saying that they were not going to do this protest, or whatever this is, rally, march, protest, whatever you want to name it. So that part, I was grateful, and I was also grateful as a white woman that I could step in to be part of this.
Yeah.
One of the things I said to you that, because we kept going, is this performative activism? Is this not? What does the label mean? I really appreciated the rally that I was in because the woman that was organizing the rally really encouraged, in fact, and I'm getting more emails from them, to get involved in other areas of your life. And so it wasn't like just go to this rally, but it was about going to other things, going to other organizations, helping out at other organizations that will help change policy and so forth. That will help our sisters that need it.
So I think you've said a couple things there that have helped me, as I've done more research, kind of tether where my uncomfortability was from. So you really keep going back and forth between the words protest and rally.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate
and march.
March. And I do appreciate that because there's actually pretty distinct differences. As you felt like there were a fine line, but if you really look at it, there's some distinct difference there. And I think that's part of the messaging of what this was, of why I felt uncomfortable by it. So a protest is meant to be disruptive. It's meant to call attention. It's meant to demand change in a disruptive way. Rallies are meant to be gatherings to show solidarity and to support community and build community. And so it's even interesting as you're talking, it clearly was a rally for a lot of people.
And it was wonderful.
And the intent was to build community, build awareness, build knowledge. And so I think this is where really my uncomfortability, as I unpacked that lied, is they kept calling this a protest. And everyone was quote unquote gearing up for a protest. Like you said, I have friends of color. You had friends of color. I saw a lot on social media. They were not going to this for all sorts of reasons, protection, all of that. And so,
and I really appreciate that.
And I do appreciate that.
Totally appreciate
that.
But
what ended up happening was not a protest. What ended up happening, what were rallies? And so I think this is where the differential, and so I think this is where, though, a lot of people back up, people of color have been a little frustrated because it was supposed to be designed as a protest by white people who are going to be the front of the line to disrupt things.
Yeah.
And instead, and again, I don't think...
So do you think that would have included elements of violence or elements of...
No, I'm not saying it needs to include elements in violence.
Yeah.
I think it needs to include elements of clear messaging of what is needed to make movements. If you look at big protests in the past, they're clearly defined as what the disruptive movement needs to happen.
Yeah.
And so I think where the disconnect happened then is, I'm not saying having the rally was a bad idea. I think the rally is a great idea, but I can see why I was uncomfortable with it being called a protest and feeling like it was performative, because it wasn't a protest.
Yeah.
It was truly, and which is, I don't want to say step down because they all have value, but I don't think it was the aggressive step that a lot of people were wanting and hoping their allies to be there for them. If that makes sense. I think a lot of people...
If I could hear you correctly, wait a second. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting.
No, it's fine. Okay. Are you checking your clock to make sure?
So wait, so if what I'm hearing you say, which I think is really interesting, is you're right. There were no demands. There were all like different things, Doge this, Doge that. There was different elements like national park, library, social security, all these statements.
A lot of frustrations.
And so that part came out, and I think it collectively created a unity where, especially maybe this particular side is feeling silenced. I don't know. But what I hear you say is, one of the things that I could speak into is my concern that the Constitution may be dismantled. So, for example, So, for example, would you see a protest being something that would be explicit to helping steps that would not dismantle the Constitution?
Yes. So I think clearly, as I've done some historical research around stuff that works. So the Women's March was actually seen more as a rally because it built unity as opposed to asking for specific.
Yeah.
But then there's also, the Black Lives Matters were protests. They're asking for specific rights, specific things to be paid attention to, civil rights. And so I think this is where all week I've been really struggling.
And they did defund the police and what they said.
Exactly.
And to clarify what was meant by defund the police, it didn't mean... They wanted the monies to be distributed to healthy spaces, which meant we should have de-escalating workers in a crisis situation rather than policing. Anyways,
totally.
That's so interesting.
But it's kind of a derailment of, I think, what I'm trying to talk to the core point is. And I don't want anyone to feel like I don't think there wasn't value in the hands-off.
Yeah.
But I think where there's a lot of disconnect and confusion and maybe even frustration from some people is, again, they were labeled as these protests. And so I think a lot of people in the community expected finally and I don't expect it as a hard word because I know a lot of people of color don't expect anything from white people because they're constantly disappointed. Yeah. But I do think there was some of these expectations of great, we're not going to be there. You said you're going to stand up, and they're going to stand up for a protest. Yeah. And a protest didn't happen. Yeah. Rallies and uniformity happened. Yeah. There's also a lot of backlash because there's been things about people have even reviewed the rallies on Yelp asking for kids activities next time, things like that. Very typical white performative. This is not meant to be a community event. But now as we see it, if it was called a rally, it would be a community event. Yeah. And so they would have had different purposes. And so that was just something that really kind of has been spiraling in my head as I felt so uncomfortable by what I felt was performative around this as a protest. And the reality is, if when we call this a protest, it is performative then. If we're calling it a rally, it did its purpose and it built unity and it built community. As a protest, though, it would be considered performative because there wasn't a lot of action or demand taken to create impacts. The other thing that I was hearing about protest is being disruptive. Protests often happen when it's not convenient. So like during the middle of a work day, so this is another thing again, why it being called like a community building rally, great, but not a protest, because a protest again is meant to disrupt. And so these are just,
No. I'm so glad you brought that up, because as Jonelle and I have been debating this all week. We have been.
This is much more civil than our...
because I got really,
annoyed.
Because...
And I also got it,
And she got annoyed because we have different points of view. And then I felt a little like, oh, you're being a little high and mighty on what you call performative activism.
And that wasn't my intent, but
well, that's okay. Don't worry about it. But what I think has been interesting, it made me think about what does constitute this idea of performative activism. Yes, I had to take time out of my Saturday to go. Yes, I had to do that. And so there was a little investment. My investment wasn't that difficult.
No.
Now, I know that people who organize these rallies and these marches, they put in a lot of effort. So I don't want to diminish that, because I am so thankful. And I'm also really thankful. The other thing that this particular rally did was they offered so many community spaces that every small town could be involved, which I loved what they did. So yes,
and I love that concept too. This is not about hands off, because I love the concept.
But I do agree with you that it's like, okay, rah, we did this on a Saturday. Now we can go and we don't need to be part of the story anymore. And that's the challenge, is when it's to be non-performative, to be actually in it, there has to be a discomfort. Like, I'm thinking about the boycotts. The boycotts have actually made me think more like I've had to redirect my pattern of shopping because of these boycotts. And so that to me isn't, or like we have a listener who I'm so proud of her. She is really taking these steps to have conversations in difficult spaces. I tried to do that the other day and I got shut down. So I'm not even doing a good job with this. And so
trying.
I'm trying.
We're all trying.
Well, I think one area I'm not trying is I jump in too quickly. I do.
Yeah.
I'm not sitting back to listen. I'm learning a lot of mistakes here. So folks, I'm learning a lot.
But on the boycotting note, if I can be really authentic and a little vulnerable here, I also think that was a little bit of my high and mighty bitterness of calling this performative activism, is because I hate to admit it, but this Target boycott has been hard on me.
Yeah.
It has been. I didn't think it would be so hard.
Yeah.
Because, January, February, I don't need that much stuff. Come springtime.
But we care about DEI.
We care. And so to clarify, I have not shopped Target at all this year. And again, I didn't think it'd be hard. It is so hard.
Well, there's
right
a
now.
new 40-day Target boycott again.
Well,
it's crazy. I know.
I'm just continuing it. But my point is, I was really frustrated with the idea that I felt like so many of these people were probably going to this thing, showing camaraderie, and yet going to Target afterwards. And there was just this little bitterness in me of again, the performative enough. And I know it's so silly and it's such first world problems that I can't shop at Target or Amazon anymore.
Yeah.
But it is so much harder than I really thought it was going to be.
Exactly. You know what? One of the previous episodes we talked about white women are doing their work, but we're running out of, we're not excited, we're running into apathy.
Oh, yeah.
Because we don't see results. Guess what?
Oh, no, I see results with Target.
Apple at Target, and also Apple at their shareholder meeting. They had one of those persons show up to the shareholder meeting trying to degrade their DEI efforts, and the Apple shareholders voted them down.
Good
90%. Yes, good for them, because DEI now,
it's important.
This anti-DEI rhetoric, sorry, white women, it's kind of it's racist, and we need to be careful with
I know
this.
We do. We need to keep
we
need to keep
our
it up.
stories going. Anyways, go on.
I have to say, on those boycotts, on those things about small little differences to try to keep us going, there was a bunch of creators on TikTok who decided to look at what they spent last year at Target versus this year or nothing, to give them just this little sense of motivation or this and that. And most of them were only like a couple $100. So of course I'm like assuming, and this is really embarrassing, listeners, because it's going to say a lot about me. I spent $1,700 already by now at Target this time last year.
Oh my God.
By just now.
Yes.
What did I spend it on?
Yeah.
I don't even know.
And you know what's so sad? Target was such a great, one of the guys at the rally, this queer gentleman at the rally I was at, he purposely wore his rainbow Target t-shirt to this rally and said, I bought this at Target. What has happened? What happened? We were making headway on the thing about DEI for us white women, and this is going to, we're speaking to each other, is it is not a language of threat. It's a language of hearing each other's stories. It's about lifting each other's voices. If we are feeling threatened by diversity, equity, inclusion, then I ask each of us to do some self-reflection. Why? Why is that threatening us? Why? These are words. These are words that allowed us to hear stories. Why is that threatening us? Anyways, I love that you did this on protests.
So I have more. We kind of derailed ourselves a little bit now, moved back into DEI, but that's fine.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that I had been hearing for a while that I think was really interesting is the 3.5% rule. Have you heard about this?
Well, at corporate,
that was the 1/3 rule.
Yeah,
Apparently, all these rules with threes out there.
No, I haven't heard of 3.5.
So this has been something that I'd been kind of like hearing before this hit, and so it's essentially this two women, Erica Chenoweth and Maria Stefan. Sorry, not great at this. But they did, in 2011, they wrote a book on civil resistance. And what they figured out based on, it's called Why Civil Resistance Works. So if anyone's interested,
that would be protests, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So they've found that they looked at movements in the 20th and 21st century and found that if 3.5% of the population organizes in resistance, it dramatically increases the chances of achieving political goals. But again, you have to be in clear pressure of the regime and of the things.
Because I like math. So if we looked at 3.5%, right, is that 3.5% voting population?
No, U.S. Well, that's a great question.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to do
They just said U.S. population.
Yeah, okay.
So for context, there was about 0.9% of the population doing these hands-off marches.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
so that's
only
still
0.9. Yeah.
So 3.5 is a lot. But here are some great examples. So the civil rights movement got more than 3.5% of people, of the population involved in the movement. And so that's what made the Civil Rights Act.
And we screwed that up.
There was the Solidarity movement in Poland, where more than 3.5% of the Polish population actively participated in bringing down the communist rule in Poland. The Arab Spring, so in Tanzania and Egypt, large-scale nonviolent protests organized by social media mobilized significant change in those regions. And then also the same-sex marriage rights. So all the movement around that, more than 3.5% of the nation in 2015 really stood up for those rights.
Yeah. And isn't that an interesting concept? Because, if we go back, we are not political scientists. We are not sociologists. But if you go back to the language of what you're talking about a protest, and you're talking about the same-sex marriage, there was a very clear issue that needed to be protested.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you're saying that mathematically over 3.5% of the population stepped into that.
Yes.
Okay. So one of the things I'm not going to use we, as a white woman, especially of my generation, maybe not your generation, but in my generation, some of this can be difficult.
Yeah.
Okay. And so
break that down. What's difficult?
Maybe what's exciting about these rallies is perhaps if we could get these rallies up to 3.5%, in these rallies, we
Yes.
could actually become unified or come together and then create
Yes.
a specific stance, we might actually move ourselves into a resistance or a protest.
And who knows, this could be the whole hands-off movement's like goal around it, because like I said, they're like they're doing it constantly, they're doing it, smart people. But I think the difference of the language of people calling that protest versus rally, and if we really understand and distinguish the difference of, these are rallies, and I'm building community and I'm building knowledge and we're building momentum, but it's not the protest yet. And so I think those are like key differences around my and I do think there's the importance of the rally, because that can get you motivated and move you out of
has you meet
active
people, and it has you have conversations. I really feel like one of the things that I've seen in the last couple years is this language of silencing. You know, that we're worried we're going to be laid off, we're going to worry that we're going to be fired. So all of a sudden, we're watching it at all these corporations. They don't want to have DEI conversations because there's the threat of, or colleges, the threat of funding. So, Jonelle, maybe.
I know, full circle.
Full circle.
I know, again, audience, we've said this, we should have left the drama conversation for you. We tried all week, but it kept the tension. It wasn't drama, you're right. The tension. We tried to stop ourselves and do it, but I think it was good that we tethered some things out separately and then came together.
But I also like, you know, if one of the things that we're saying is why we go to apathy is because we don't see results. This is a long game. This isn't a short game. And this game has consequences. And the biggest consequence I can see is not truly embracing our sisters. And so, which is a big consequence. And so,
but that's why I brought up the target and the money. It's like finding ways to find little hope. And that was hope for me. Like if I spent $1,700 at Target and they lost just one person, how much money are they actually losing by all those people kind of thing. So find little ways to keep motivating yourself.
And the resistance in that space is we do want inclusive buying power,
and it's so
inclusive.
They have these really cute
stories,
placemats for the spring.
And to think that these corporations aren't listening to us, it's frustrating.
It is.
Okay, well,
but don't worry, listeners. I'm not giving into Target. I'm not giving into the Kate Spade launch. I'm not giving into their adorable spring linens.
I know.
I'm going to hold strong, everyone.
Hold strong, Jonelle. Hold strong as a white woman.
It's going to be hardest at Christmas when my entire wrapping paper, I get really into wrapping paper, everyone, and it's always from Target. And we haven't gone that far yet.
No, we haven't gone that far yet. Maybe
things will change. Will happen.
Yeah,
but I'm standing strong.
I'm sensing a new resistance song that has like Target or corporations in it. Okay, anyways, thanks for joining us on White Women Wake Up. We hope today's conversation sparks something in you, whether it's reflection, a new question, or a deeper commitment to showing up with empathy and accountability. If you found this episode meaningful, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. You can also connect with us on Instagram, YouTube, or at whitewomenwakeup.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts and keep the conversation going. Until next time.
Bye.
Stay curious, stay open, and let's keep waking up together. Bye.
Are you saying, hey, welcome to White Women Wake Up? Oh my God.
This happened to me the other day when I was on with Matt. Like out of nowhere, I got balloons.
I love it.